Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by two great apps, GoodNotes and Outcast. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hey, John, how are you?
Oh, digging out from the snow.
I saw a picture, actually a video of your situation over there, and it's just crazy. I see that amount of snow in the movies about America, and I always think, well, that's clearly exaggerated, that's
Right.
too much. But actually, it's real, and you show me a video, there's a lot of snow.
Yes. I showed you Jennifer slaving away shoveling snow with me yesterday morning, and it's only gotten worse from there. So when I need a break from recording or working or whatever else I'm doing, I go out and shovel snow. It's been snowing on and off for 3 days.
That's a great workout.
It is. It closes my rings pretty quickly. So, Federico, we have a little follow-up from last week.
Okay.
Because if you recall, you told the story of going to IKEA and taking their measuring tapes so that you could enter your waist measurements into the health app, which is a great, very Federico story. And I knew that I had heard of some sort of health kit type belt that existed, and a listener sent us a tweet and reminded me of what it was, because I couldn't find it when I was working on the show notes. I just couldn't find this thing, but it's called the Welt belt.
Oh, God.
And it was a Kickstarter, and you can get it at weltcorp.com/welt. It does what it says. It tracks your motion, I think, and it also tracks your waistline, and you may want to check this out.
With this device, you're literally putting a battery that has Bluetooth around your waist, which to me sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, well,
it's great, that I'm looking on the website. It automates waist measurements and tracks your activity. There's an iPhone app. It certainly removes a lot of friction, but battery on my wrists I think is as far as I can go. I'm not putting a battery down there. Just it seems concerning, but it's a real product. So thank you for the follow-up.
Yes, I'm not going to push it on you because I feel the same way. I don't think I would be putting the battery belt around my waist.
No.
So one other piece of follow-up is you also mentioned last week the app Bring, which you've been using at the grocery store, and I had not heard of that app before, so I gave it a shot this week when I was out buying provisions for the big snowstorm. And it was very clear to me almost immediately that this is an app designed in Europe, because there were a few interesting things that I couldn't find in its database. Couldn't find macaroni and cheese, or salsa, or English muffins, which I don't think are a thing in England.
What? Explain to me, because the macaroni and cheese I understand. Like, in Europe, because it's a type of pasta, right? It's pasta with a lot of cheese. So typically, I would add the pasta that I want to buy and the cheese that I want to buy, not the mac and cheese together. But the salsa, like, what type of salsa you're talking about here? Like, it's just a generic salsa, like
just any salsa to put on, tortilla chips.
Yeah.
Tomato, onions, peppers, garlic, whatever else is in salsa. It comes in a jar, and there's a bunch of different brands, obviously. But Bring it's not really focused on brands, I found. It's more like you say, I need carrots, or I want bread, and that kind of thing. And which I actually like, because I find those, it's sometimes when apps try to get too specific, it's very hard to find exactly what it is that you buy. It might be something close, but not quite. And I really don't care in a lot of circumstances what the brand is anyway. I'm just buying things like milk or cheese or whatever it is.
Yeah. So that seems to me like a very European limitation and design choice. So thank you for actually trying to use it in America. That's very fascinating. Speaking of shopping list apps, I wanted to point out that it was not clear to me that the popular app AnyList, it also has a feature to automatically sort your items based on sections of a grocery store.
Okay.
I didn't know that. And considering that I've been trying all these apps that have automatic sorting, so we talked about grocery, and then I mentioned Bring, I'm probably going to try AnyList too and see how it works. What's interesting about AnyList is that it already supports SiriKit,
Right.
and which means that it works on the HomePod natively. And as I'm waiting for my HomePod, flying out from Chicago, thanks to John, and coming to Italy, I want to see how it works with the SiriKit extension on the iPhone and AnyList, and how the automatic sorting works. My concern is that I don't think AnyList will have the option to switch to an Italian database for items.
Right.
So like I have to use it in English, and which means that I have to talk to Siri in English, of course, but also I will see items, products in English when I type in manually in the app. So, but I want to try it because it's very popular. It's on every device. It's like iPhone, iPad, web, and it's got a Siri extension. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think Ryan tried it out yesterday with his HomePod when he first got it, and it worked. So it's that's a good use case. If you're standing in your kitchen and you realize you need something, you can just
Exactly.
ask Siri to add it to your shopping list. Thanks to GoodNotes for sponsoring App Stories this week. You may have already heard of GoodNotes, which is an iOS note-taking app. But if you haven't tried it, you really should. GoodNotes is incredibly focused on creating the very best digital handwriting experience ever. The app goes beyond creating notebooks of your handwritten notes. It lets you do things like mark up photos and documents too. GoodNotes is incredibly powerful. You don't need an iPad Pro and Pencil to use it, but it's one of the best ways to do it, and it's transformative. The Apple Pencil experience is so good that Apple recently featured GoodNotes in its TV ad, What's a Computer?, showing off the ability to create multimedia notes by combining handwriting alongside images and other content. GoodNotes was one of the top paid apps on iPad worldwide in 2017. It was first in Germany, second in Japan, and fifth in the United States. I want to highlight 3 features that make GoodNotes special, though. First up is handwriting recognition. GoodNotes can make your handwritten notes text searchable. That's not something you can do with paper, and it's not something that a lot of other note-taking apps can do either. Second is flexibility. This app is particularly great for students, for instance, because you can combine your handwritten notes with things like PDFs, images, Word documents, and even PowerPoint slides, so everything from a class or a project is neatly and tidily kept in one place. The third thing I want to mention is that you can import custom note-taking templates. This lets you give your notes their very own look. I know Federico uses this. He has a special template with the Mac Stories logo on it. Finally, I want to mention the iPad too, because GoodNotes has terrific drag and drop support that lets you do some amazing things. Just one example is that you can take a handwritten note and drag it into a task manager like Todoist, and it immediately converts your handwritten notes into text. This is a perfect way to brainstorm in handwritten note form in GoodNotes and then turn those notes and those ideas into actionable tasks. Please go to our show notes and use the link to GoodNotes to learn more. Thanks again to GoodNotes for supporting the show. So that's a lot about shopping lists for a show that's about RSS readers, right?
Yes.
And we have a whole bunch of them to cover. So just as really quick background, I think there are 2 components that we want to talk about, and one is services and the other is apps. And we can kind of go through the services quickly, but I always feel like picking how you're going to deal with RSS is a 2-step process, because you have to decide whether you're going to use a syncing backend service, and if so, which one, depending on what features it has. And then you have to pick an app to actually view the RSS feeds. And it's a little bit of a tricky thing to figure out, because there are a lot of different things and there's a lot of overlap between what the apps do versus the services do and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. What are you using these days?
I've been using iNoReader for just about 2 years, I think. I've had periods when, just to make sure that I was still using the best option for me, I experimented again with Feedly, or I think at some point also NewsBlur and Feedbin, because I like to make sure that I'm using, the best option available on the market at the very moment. But I always go back to iNoReader because the combination of great performance, because it's really fast, and the ability to create complex rules for filtering stuff, marking certain articles that contain keywords as read. But the point that you make about it can be hard to keep track of which features are supported on a service and they are available via the API, and which ones any specific client on iOS, any RSS reader that you can download from the App Store does or does not support, which creates this fascinating research challenge of I need to understand which clients for the service that I like support all the features that I can use on the service. So for example, some RSS readers, they do not let you see the tags or the saved searches that you create on iNoReader, whereas other clients surface those sections as folders. So you can go in and see articles that belong to a saved search. And if you start considering that maybe 10 popular RSS services exist these days, and then you can find at least 10 solid RSS clients on iOS, the challenge is just incredible to keep track of all the features that are available on the web, but also supported on iOS, and how they work on the iPhone and iPad. And then if you add the native iOS APIs, like which clients do support also drag and drop on iOS 11, that requires a lot of experimentation, which is why we wanted to do this show.
Yes, and it's also why I have 3 RSS readers on my home screen right now.
It's a side effect.
Yes, it is, because I've been doing some heavy experimentation lately myself. And I think of it a little bit like I do something like SaneBox, which I know you and I both use for email, because you've got some of the features that you're using with email sitting out on a server somewhere with a service, and the rest you're getting through with whatever email client you're using on iOS or the Mac or whatever. And when it comes to the services, it's worth looking at all of them because there, as you said, there's a lot of them, and they range from everything from something like Feed Wrangler that our friend David Smith runs, which is very fast and syncs very well, but doesn't have a lot of its own built-in features, to something like iNoReader, which we've talked about before and we both use, which has all kinds of filtering and other things that you can set up on the web and may or may not flow through to your reader.
So why don't we start by talking about some iOS apps to read these articles from your RSS service. And the first one that I want to mention is called, this is something that I discovered last year, but that's actually been around for several years at this point. It's called Lire. I think it means to read in French. And Lire, do you think that's right? You know
I think
French.
it's right. You remember me. I was born in France. You know, we like to have this conversation about every 2 months.
Yes, you were born. I still don't understand why, but you were born in France.
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. What I like about Lire is that it combines integration with popular services with great iOS 11 design. So here you will find the large headline type of aesthetic that was established by Apple with iOS 10 and eventually with iOS 11, which is very, very clean, very legible, I think. It looks very nice. But the key feature in the latest version of the app is integration with drag and drop on iOS 11. So the developer of Lire took inspiration from Bear, the note-taking app for iOS and macOS, and he added this feature that is, I don't think it has an official name. I call it like an action bar or a floating bar. But essentially, when you start dragging an article from a list, like your unread section or a folder, this floating bar appears at the bottom of the list, and you can drop an article there to basically bring up this contextual menu with a bunch of options like share as link, or send to a read later service. And what I like about this is that it fully supports iOS 11's drag and drop API. So not only can you pick up a single article, but you can also pick up multiple ones and create like a stack of articles. But as you're dragging those articles around, you can still interact with the app using the other hand, using another finger. So it fully supports multi-touch and drag and drop. And this works on the iPhone and the iPad, but on the iPad, you also get the ability to export those articles out of Lire and into something else like Tweetbot or Gladys or whatever supports drag and drop. And I think it works really well. Have you tried this floating bar thing?
I have. I installed this at the beginning of the week, and I've been really impressed with it. I love the floating bar. It supports iNoReader. It's got maybe 7 other services that it supports, so it's pretty robust in that sense as well.
Yeah, it can be a little bare bones maybe in the article view. The text view, I don't think it's as elegant or as something like Reader, for example, or
Right.
other clients. It can be a little basic, but it works well. And especially there's like many other reading applications these days, it comes with a full text extraction feature. So if you're reading a truncated RSS feed, you can let Lear take care of automatically expanding that article to extract the full text of the story. And it works quite well, especially because you can set up settings and preferences to say, I want The Verge, for example, to always load in full text mode, but I don't want to do the same for, say, Daring Fireball, because that would mean that the linked posts that John Gruber publishes
Right.
will not feature the original text of Daring Fireball, but they will expand as the full text of the destination link. And so you can have these toggles to say, I want this website to load in full text, I want this other website to stay as normal. And also you can do offline caching. So you can say, this full text, I want both the actual body text and the images to be downloaded. It's very granular. You can set all these preferences in the app settings, and it works well. I wish it was a little more sophisticated in terms of what the article view looks like. But I would say if you're looking for an RSS client that looks great on iOS 11, supports drag and drop and a bunch of services, and it allows you to read RSS feeds in full text mode, this is one of your best options.
Yeah, it is a good option. I agree with the article view. I think the list view is done better than the text view.
Yes.
And I appreciate the list view, because oftentimes I'm just scrolling through real quickly to see if there's something important that I want to probably read later, and then I can just shoot it off to Pocket really easily with a swipe, which is really nice. One thing that a lot of these apps don't have that I would like, though, is integration with Read It Later services, where you can actually read your Pocket or Instapaper articles right in the RSS client. Some of them have this, but not very many. And it'd be nice to be able to just go to one place to see all your articles.
Yeah, I think ReadKit does on the Mac.
It does, yeah.
It lets you connect your Instapaper and maybe Pocket account. So that's nice. Another iOS app that I want to mention, that actually a new version launched just today, is Fiery Feeds. And Fiery Feeds, there's a version 2 is out on the App Store. If you don't see it yet, it's maybe propagating because it's launching today on Monday. And I've been testing this new version for, I think, a couple of months. And I will have an article on Mac Stories at some point this week or next. What I like about this update is that Fiery Feeds was already one of the more power user oriented RSS clients. It allowed you to set up like custom URL scheme based sharing actions. So you could, for example, hit like a button and send a story directly to Tweetbot, for instance, which was nice. But this new version modernizes a bunch of interactions in Fiery Feeds, which was looking kind of dated before. Now, I still think that Fiery Feeds does not look as elegant as Lear on iOS 11. It still has its own design aesthetic, which does not necessarily play well with the rest of the system. So, it's a combination of the default blue theme or the fonts that are used throughout the app, but I don't think it looks as elegant as Lear. But what makes Fiery Feeds 2 stand out from anything else that we're going to cover today is the new feature called Smart Views. Now, if you are familiar with the old self-hosted RSS service Fever by Sean Eman, I don't know how to
Yes, I think that's right.
Fever was a RSS service that you used to run on your own server. And it came with basically the entire structure of the app was based around the idea of showing you articles that were hot in your subscription list on any given day of the week by taking a look at which links everybody was linking to effectively. So if Apple, for example, had a press release and then Daring Fireball and Mac Stories and 9 to 5 Mac were all linking to the same press release, then the press release itself, the link to the Apple website would be at the top of your Fever list because it was a hot link of the day.
Right.
And now Fiery Feeds has this very view as a feature of the app. So it's called Hot Links, which is very much inspired by Fever. and it works quite well. It's not as perfect, I think, as Fever. Sometimes, for example, during the beta and also I think in the final version, I saw stuff like a website's own Twitter profile in the hot links view, because maybe the website was linking to itself to say follow us on Twitter, and the app thought that was a hot link. So it's still kind of buggy, but I would say 80% of the time it works really well, and it shows you a temperature, so like an actual thermometer with the with the temperature of the links, and you can go in there, you see the link, you tap an arrow, and you see which articles from your RSS feeds link to that page, and you can either go directly to the link or you can view the associated stories. It's really nicely done, and it's a way to sort of go in and say, I'm behind on my RSS queue, show me what's hot and popular today. Kind of like Nuzzle, but for RSS feeds. And it's a great addition to the app.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It sounds exactly like Nuzzle to me, although whereas Nuzzle is based entirely on Twitter, I think.
Yeah.
This is based on RSS feeds.
Yeah, and the other smart view is the low and high frequency folders. And as the name suggests, it's a way to go in and say, show me articles from websites that do not publish often. And this feature is similar to what Slow Feeds offered for many years. Slow Feeds is an iOS app. So you can see low volume websites. You can see their stories in this folder. And the high frequency is for ideal if you subscribe to TechCrunch or The Verge, very high volume sources. Go in there and just mark everything as red if you're behind on your RSS queue. And overall, I would say Fiery Feeds is still great if you want to. There's a lot of settings. There's also a new hidden settings page. I think if you tap and hold the settings icon, now you can go in there and fine-tune everything about the app. It supports many services. It's fast. It's still kind of strange in places, especially for design, and like the hot links is not 100% perfect. But overall, these additions make it a real solid alternative to, for example, to Lear.
Right. And I think that those high and low frequency site features are really nice. I mean, I've set up something a little bit similar to that just on the server side with InnoReader and dealing with some of my high volume feeds by putting them off, by pulling out certain types of things based on keyword searches that go into my regular feed, and then other stuff from The Verge, for instance, would go into a more general folder. And if I don't have time, I just mark all that stuff red or just thumb through it really quickly. Whereas stuff I know I want to read about on The Verge, like a story about the HomePod, for instance, will go somewhere where I'll see it and actually spend some time on it. Thanks to Outcast for sponsoring App Stories this week. Outcast is a brand new watch app that lets you download and play podcasts directly to your watch. There are multiple ways to find shows. First, you can use the search functionality that lets you either speak your queries or scribble them out using the watch's scribble feature to spell the name of the show. There are also categories that you can browse, things like comedy, technology, news, politics. It's all there, and it lists the very most popular shows in each category. You can also import a list of your favorite shows from another podcast app on your iPhone. Just export the OPML file and then use the share sheet to copy that file to Outcast. What's most remarkable about Outcast, though, is that it can be used entirely from the watch without your iPhone. Everything from finding shows, downloading them, and then playing them can be done straight from the watch without your phone. It creates an amazing amount of freedom. Just connect a pair of AirPods or Bluetooth headphones, and you're ready to go. Outcast manages this with careful attention to detail and design. You can see it in the design of the app, which is made by Crunchy Bagel, the Apple Design Award-winning developer behind Streaks. What Crunchy Bagel has managed to do is make the best-looking, easiest solution for listening to podcasts on the Apple Watch. Right now, you can get Outcast for a special launch price of just 99 cents. That's a great deal, and one you should take advantage of. There's a link in the show notes, and please use it because it lets Crunchy Bagel know that you heard about Outcast from App Stories. Thanks again to Outcast for sponsoring the show.
So the next on our list is NewsBlur. Have you tried NewsBlur recently?
I have. And the design of the app I don't like a lot. It does have some interesting features. It does have a low frequency feed feature, a lot like Fiery feeds, which I think NewsBlur is the first place that I saw this. And I think you and I have talked about it before. It's a nice feature to have. It works basically the same as the Fiery feeds one sounds like from the beta that you've been testing. It's a good quality, highly customizable service on the web. But I think if I were using that as my back-end syncing service, I would probably look elsewhere for a slightly different iOS app that has a little bit more readable interface.
Yeah, I think the problem with NewsBlur is that kind of looks like a Windows program,
It does.
both on the web and on iOS. It's got this, I don't know how to describe it, but it looks like a desktop app. It's very peculiar look, but it's powerful. For example, the training feature of NewsBlur is really well done, I think. It's based on the idea of thumbs up and thumbs down, and you
Right.
can basically promote or downvote keywords, specific authors, which I haven't found anywhere else unless you maybe do it manually in some way. You can, for example, say, I want to hide all stories from Federico on Mac Stories, but I want to promote those from John. And so, you can also do the same for entire publications or tags. It's really well done. It's too bad about the look because it's, these features are all exclusive to the official client,
Right.
which does not look great on iOS.
Right. So the next one I think we should talk about a little bit is Reeder, Reeder, which I've used on and off for years. And until just a couple of weeks ago, that's what I was using. And I guess I have a complicated relationship with Reeder because I love the way this app looks, but it also concerns me, as I think it does you, that I don't think the developer is moving it forward very much. I mean, it supports a lot of services, and it gets the kind of updates that are necessary to make it work with the latest, Apple OS updates, but it hasn't really gotten a major feature overhaul in quite some time.
Yeah, it's too bad because it looks fantastic, and in terms of performance, like the scrolling and the way that, for example, Safari View Controller slides in when you tap on a link on a story, it looks great. But there was a time when the developer Silvio Rizzi used to be really active and have betas, have new versions and updates, and keep people posted on Twitter. And I don't know what happened. Maybe as another job now. I don't know, but Reader basically receives one update a year effectively for either a new screen size or a new iOS version, and that's about it. So it's it works fine on iOS 11, but it's still the same app that it used to be like 4 years ago.
Right. And I would still recommend it, though, if your RSS needs are something relatively simple, such as you just want to be able to read through your articles and maybe once in a while shuffle them off to a place like Pocket or Instapaper. It doesn't have the recent iOS 11 features, but if all you're doing is sending something to a read it later service, then Reader is a great option because it looks fantastic and it will do things like that.
Let's talk about, speaking of elegant RSS readers, this is probably the most elegant one. I love the way that it looks. It's unread.
Yes.
Unread as a sort of a complicated history. It was created by Jared Sinclair 4 years ago. Then it was sold to Supertop, the makers of Castro, the podcast client. And last year, it was acquired by Golden Hill Software. And the person behind Golden Hill Software, John, I think it's his name, he's been busy actually releasing a ton of updates and changes and fixes to Unread, which is catching up in terms of new screen sizes, iOS 11 support, and bug fixes for problems that have been around for years. And Unread is there's 2 things you need to know about Unread. It's based on the idea of comfortable gestures. It's heavily reliant on swiping to navigate with the app and interact with the app. So horizontal swipes to navigate your folders, open an article, and swipe again to share an article and bring up like an action menu from the right side of the screen. It's very comfortable and to use, and it works really well with one hand. And also it looks fantastic. I think it's very minimal. So a huge focus on typography, big fonts, lots of white space and themes. You can change the app's colors. There's also a true black theme on the iPhone 10. But at the moment, the app does not support iNoReader, although I believe John is working on it. So I think
Right.
we'll see iNoReader support in the near future.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of meeting John when we were at Release Notes in Chicago earlier last year in October, and we took the chance to kind of corner him and tell him all the things that we would like in Unread. And he's been, I think when he acquired the app first, which I think makes a lot of sense, he drilled down into the code and fixed a lot of longstanding bugs, and now he's been working on some new features, some of which I think we had suggested to him. And I hope we're going to see something very soon from him with some new features, because I'd love to give it another try.
Yeah, I think Unread is really a pleasure to use, especially on the iPhone, because you can use with one hand. You can just go in, read a bunch of stories, and then mark as read or share. It works really, really well. The next we have a few other mentions on our list, and the next one, it says public beta, and this is beta that I'm not part of. So tell me about this app, John, because it's I don't know what it is.
This is Cappuccino, and I don't remember how I came across this. I started by using the Mac version. There are two. If you go to the website, which we'll have a link in the show notes, you can download a beta right from there of the Mac app and request a beta of the iOS app. It looks great, terrific design. But there are a few things about it that have bothered me on the Mac, because I have actually not tried the iOS app. On the Mac, it sends you notifications even if the app is closed, which is something I really don't like. You can obviously change that in the settings of macOS, but I think notifications with RSS are a tricky thing to do right, because if you have a lot of feeds, it can get annoying very fast to have notifications coming in every time an article is published. And I don't really like that. So it's one to keep an eye on, because I think the design is fantastic, but the functionality is still a little limited compared to other alternatives. And I didn't like how notifications are handled.
Okay. So I'm on the website. I'm trying to sign up for the test flight beta, but it's not working. So I'll try again.
Okay.
It looks nice. There's a bunch of screenshots from Mac Stories, which I appreciate.
Yep.
Of course, we mentioned iNoReader as our favorite service. iNoReader as an iOS client, which looks fine. I think it's very basic. It doesn't offer a lot of basically all the most important features from the web app.
Right.
You cannot use them on iOS. And the last one that I want to mention about iOS is Newsify. Newsify looks really nice. It's I would say probably one of the most popular RSS clients on the App Store. I've used it for a while. The problem is that it only supports Feedly or its own service and iCloud. I think it doesn't work with iNoReader. It doesn't work with NewsBlur. And I need to use iNoReader because of all the rules for filters that I have. It's a freemium app. It looks nice. Also, another app with a ton of settings, so you can customize a lot of aspects of the app. So I would say if you're a Feedly user, don't use the Feedly app on iOS, which is kind of terrible, but use Newsify instead. And you can also sign up for a premium subscription, and you can activate the full text extraction and full text search, which is really nicely done. But I cannot use it because it does not support iNoReader.
Okay. I think we'll go through the Mac alternatives relatively quickly, because unfortunately, like too many categories of apps that we've discussed recently, it's not nearly as robust a category on the Mac as it is on iOS. But there are some good options. The one that we've mentioned a couple already. I mean, one is ReadKit, which I used to use a lot. The problem is it doesn't support iNoReader. I mean, what's nice about it is it's got a great 3-pane layout with a nice design, and it also supports read it later services like Instapaper and Pocket, which most RSS clients do not. So if that's something you're looking for, definitely take a look at ReadKit. The other one, and the one that I use on my Mac currently, is Reader, because like the iOS app, it doesn't get a lot of updates. However, it looks great and it's familiar because I've used it for years on iOS. And it's probably got, to me, it's got both the best design on the Mac, and it's got just a ton of keyboard shortcuts, which means I can just blow through lots of articles very, very quickly. So those are my two favorite, I guess. Another one worth looking at is called Leaf. And Leaf is more recent. It's solid. It doesn't support iNoReader again, so it's one that I've tried but haven't really dove into really deeply because I don't have a way to really bring in all my feeds other than just completely exporting the OPML and doing it on kind of a standalone basis. And I don't really want to. I know I don't want to do that. But it does have a good UI, not too different than Reader. And if you're looking for something on the Mac, it's worth a look as well. And I have one other one that's worth mentioning because it takes a different approach to RSS, and maybe a little bit like Fever and Fiery Feeds, as you mentioned, Federico, which is, it's called Feedy, and it uses Twitter to determine the popularity of posts and try to surface the ones that are most popular. Now, it depends how you use Twitter as to whether that works for you or not. If you don't follow a lot of publications, or the people you follow don't link a lot of articles that they read, maybe it's not as useful to you, but it's kind of, again, a little bit of the nuzzle type of approach to RSS. It has a UI that reminded me a lot of the email client Sparrow, if you remember Sparrow back in the day.
Yeah.
Because it's got, the kind of the narrow window, and when you open an article, it opens the article in a separate window from the list of articles, which I personally don't like a lot. But if you like the look of Sparrow and with email and you want to carry that over to RSS, you can do it. The other thing worth mentioning about Feedy is it doesn't sync with any services. So this is a category. A lot of these apps will allow you to do this, but I never really have, which is use it as a standalone app. So you subscribe to feeds in the app, but they're only going to ever be in Feedy. You can't get them on your iPhone or your iPad or have them sync with anything else, which is kind of, that's, to me, that's a problem.
That feels like the past. I think
it does.
The best way to go about it now, and the way of the future, is you sign up for a service that in most cases it offers a web app with all the controls, and then you find a client, for sure on iOS and maybe also on the Mac, that allows you to access the service and consume all the feeds that you add, and it gives you the freedom to try different apps on multiple devices. And hopefully, with this episode, we've given listeners a few options, both on iOS and the Mac.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, is that because if you're using one of these sync services, you don't need to necessarily be using the same app on the Mac as you do on iOS. I'm using Reader on my Mac, but I'm using 3 different other services on my iPhone right now. I'll settle on one soon, but it probably isn't going to be Reader based on what I've been seeing so far. All right, Federico, I think that's it for this week. A lot of RSS clients out there to try. Everybody should download a couple and give them a try and see how they like them. Thanks again to our sponsors, Good Notes and Outcast, for making this episode possible. If you haven't checked out appstories.net before, maybe go check it out. That's where we have our show notes as well as other stuff. You can find Federico on Twitter. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.